get them used to all that money that's been flowing overseas from the United States. I mean, think about it. The oil money coming from you and me from the United States to foreigners pretty much is a transfer of wealth. It's a tax. And if they prevent oil from being produced in the United States and we need oil, then we're pretty much paying a tax that we definitely need. You know, this is not a tax that we could choose to avoid unless we choose not to have any oil consumption. That'd pretty much shut down our economy. But is that the goal? Maybe there's a goal. Maybe there's something else more insidious. Is it possible that they're attempting to basically bankrupt the entire world? The Middle East being part of it. Maybe Iran, instead of attacking Iran directly militarily, how about attacking them financially? How about drive the price of oil down so far that all of their oil revenues, all of their government revenues just falls off a cliff? Maybe that'll cause disarray. Maybe it'll cause regime change. And of course, the media will all play it up as, look at this wonderful happening. Our government has caused oil prices to fall, and they're doing wonderful things for you. But then again, if all of this oil revenue money doesn't go to these foreign countries that's been buying all of the debt the United States government's been issuing, who's going to buy it? Maybe nobody. And if nobody's going to buy it, then that's going to cause the prices of debt to go up. Interest rates are going to skyrocket, and we're still going to end up with high inflation rates because they're going to pump money to cover the debt expenditures. Yeah, price inflation's still going up, folks. It is still there. We have a huge monetary system problem, and it's just going to get worse. They have painted themselves into basically a corner, and I don't know how they're going to get out of this. They're going to probably try to blame somebody else, which is why they're probably going to initiate war with Iran. Now, talking about initiating war with Iran, guess what? Seymour Hersh, reporter for the New York Times, has written a column and has been interviewed on a YouTube video that there was a meeting last year in the vice president's office. Yeah, you know, Mr. Cheney, Mr. Good Guy. And apparently, this was a high-level meeting in the vice president's office in order to discuss what to do with Iranian strategy to have Iran attack the United States. Well, no, we're not going to do that, but let's see what we can do for instigation. That's right. Instigate. A false flag operation. Apparently, during a meeting in the VP's office with high-level administration officials, Cheney proposed dressing up Navy SEALs as Iranians, putting them on fake Iranian speedboats, and have the Navy SEALs shoot at the ships in the Straits of Hormuz. Have you heard that before? Yes, that's called the Gulf of Tonkin incident. See, these guys never even have a new playbook. They just use the same plays. It's like, the Packers. They get Favre, they go back, they throw it. Well, these guys do the same thing. They grab the old storylines, they go back, and they throw it. Only sometimes people are getting a little smarter here. The question is, why did not Seymour Hersh report on this when it happened, if he knew about this earlier? Well, he claims that the newspaper refused to go with it because, well, they turned it down. They said that option was just not viable because they didn't want Americans killing Americans. Okay, so the fact that they discussed a conspiracy to go ahead and attack American ships with a false flag operation, Americans pretending to be Iran, that's not news because they didn't carry it out. I kind of wonder what the news is all up to anymore. So there we have it. Problem, reaction, solution number one. And the United States is always involved. Now, here's another interesting article, as we've probably seen from the news. Another suicide happened the other day. You might have heard about it on the news. It happened from a man that I don't think many of us have ever heard about. His name was Bruce Ivins, a scientist working at the Maryland Bioweapons Facility, where the post-9/11 anthrax came from. And all of a sudden, this guy decides to kill himself because they claim that the feds had finally figured out that he's the one that sent all the letters, that he was a wacko, nutty scientist, and all the pressure from the potential charges that he was going to be put up through, all the murder charges, he couldn't handle it, and so he killed himself with an overdose. Right. I really believe that. Do you believe that? Let's take a look at this. The 9/11 anthrax issue is one of those issues that got slammed up inside the head right after 9/11. It just continued and continued to put the pressure on that Arab fundamentalist terrorists were out to get us, right? And they were going to send anthrax all over the country. As a matter of fact, they shut down the mail system for that anthrax. And all of a sudden, you became a terrorist threat because it was so easy to carry anthrax. And Saddam Hussein, he was involved in making anthrax, and we all know that Saddam Hussein was all part of 9/11. Right? Not. But we were all told that because that's the way they wanted to attack Iran. So let's take a look at this. The FBI had been questioning this man for a long time, and yet the news basically left this whole anthrax investigation completely off the table for so many years, right after they basically found out that it was anthrax from the Maryland bioweapons facility. And then they'd been targeting this guy named Stephen Hatfield, but why? Now, you remember the letters that got sent saying, that Allah's great and Christians and Jews must die. Remember that? So it had to have been those rascally radical fundamentalists. But I look at it this way. Maybe he wasn't a wacko guy, and maybe he did some unusual things. Maybe Bruce Ivins was in fact investigating the crime, something the feds refused to do. Maybe Bruce Ivins, who actually worked at this facility, who in fact was an anthrax vaccine scientist, actually was a little curious as about how all this leaked out. Maybe he was a little eccentric, but quite a few of us have our little eccentricities. Maybe he was just a convenient scapegoat. Is it possible? Maybe, just maybe, Bruce Ivins was the good guy. I don't know. I can't prove it. Maybe he was on the trail of the people who actually are responsible for the anthrax outbreak. Maybe Bruce Ivins was murdered. Did anybody think of that? Well, you're certainly not going to get it from the news. But you ought to read some of the stories. There's a good one on CNN, Anthrax Suicide. You should read that. But better yet is this one. Glenn Greenwald from Salon.com, and we've discussed some of the stuff Glenn's looked at in the past. He has a very good article on Salon about the anthrax suicide. And you know what? I think Glenn might agree with News on this one a little bit. Let's see what Glenn had to say. Here's some pertinent sections from Glenn's article. It was really the anthrax letters, the first one sent on September 18th, just 1 week after 9/11, that severely ratcheted up the fear levels and created the climate that would dominate in this country for the next several years. It was anthrax, sent directly into the heart of the country's elite political and media institutions, to then Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle, Senator Pat Leahy, NBC News anchor Tom Brokaw, and other leading media outlets, that created the impression that social order itself was genuinely threatened by Islamic radicalism. If the now deceased Ivins really was the culprit behind the attacks, then that means that the anthrax came from a U.S. government lab, which we know it did, came from Maryland, sent by a top U.S. Army scientist at Fort Detrick without resort to any speculation or inferences at all. It's hard to overstate the significance of that fact. From the beginning, there was a clear intent on the part of the anthrax attacker to create a link between the anthrax attacks and both Islamic radicals and the 9/11 attacks. This was the letter sent to Brokaw, and I've got the copy of the letter, and I'll put it up on the screen.